Welcome to this Misfortune Ultimate Guide. I'm Zoose, and after testing plenty of builds from the best pro and solo queue players, Misfortune is really dynamic when selecting runes and items, so I've put as much info in this guide, specifically the build section. It contains everything you need if you want to try it out right now. Each build feels unique, yet they are all viable for certain situations. She's the first champ I reached Diamond 1 with, back in Season 7, and hopefully this video can help you guys reach your goals. If you find this guide helpful at any time, be sure to give it a like. There's a full list of timestamps and details in the description. Let's start with abilities plus special tips to give you an advantage right now. Misfortune's passive, Love Tap, does physical damage whenever she basic attacks a target that was not the target of her previous basic attack. Basically, as long as you hit a different target, you'll proc this passive damage, but if you keep attacking the same target, you will only proc it once. It works on champs, towers, minions, and all other monsters. This passive makes it incredibly easy to last hit minions. Use it in small trades in lane. It's great in bot lane fights and team fights in general. For example, switching autos from ADC and support will do the most optimal damage. However, if there's one target you want to kill, it's best to just focus them. Use this to wave clear by always auto attacking a different minion. Do this on towers too if there's minions nearby. Auto the minion, then the tower, then the minion, etc. You'll deal optimal damage to push the wave and chunk the tower. Her Q, Double Up, is a click target ability that deals physical damage which can bounce onto another target. It applies on-hit effects like red buff and your Love Tap passive. If it kills the first target, it will always critically strike the second target. If you've purchased crit items, the bounce can still critically strike whether or not it kills the first target. It usually bounces directly behind the first target, but if minions and enemies are moving around, the bounce can feel unpredictable. You should be constantly trying to hit low HP minions to proc the increased damage to enemies that are behind the minion. A simple strategy in lane is to set up low HP minions by auto attacking them until they're very low HP, then immediately queuing them, aiming to have the Q execute that minion so then you can get the max damage bounce. Try to predict when the enemy will walk up to last hit a minion, as they'll be forced to either miss CS or take a Q bounce. Use it in between autos for a nice trade, more info in combos. Use it whenever you see two enemies lined up in teamfights. Even though the bounce isn't really a click target ability, it will draw minion aggro, so keep that in mind. Her W, Strut, has two parts. A passive which increases your movement speed if you haven't taken any damage for 5 seconds and increases even more after another 5 seconds. The active increases your attack speed for 4 seconds as well as applying the full movement speed from your W passive. Every time you proc Love Tap, it decreases the cooldown of this ability by 2 seconds. Use this right after a death for movement speed out of base with no mana cost. You'll be able to tell when you have this movement speed activated with the hearts animation instead of looking down. If you level it right in base at level 1, the movement speed will make you one of the quickest to invade or protect your entrances. You can get this or Q at level 1. Q might be better to take at level 1 for more pressure in lane. W costs less mana than spamming Q early on, so pick accordingly. You can't really go wrong with either one. Some builds will actually require you to max this ability first, which will be explained in that section. If you ever need to escape, use this right after you have taken damage, or any damage will cancel your movement speed. Activate this when you're taking towers or doing monster objectives for more damage over time. Her E, Make It Rain, is an AoE skill shot ability that deals magic damage and slows enemies within the area. This provides great CC to catch up or slow an enemy that's chasing you. If you are chasing an enemy, try to place it in front of them so they walk into the slow. If they're chasing you, place it in front of them or sometimes on top of yourself. Use it to save an ally when you can, since the long range won't make it too risky for you to use. It provides vision, so use it to check brushes or scout epic monsters if you don't have any wards. It's a great zoning tool in fights when you want to slow down a threat from coming in. It can be used as a form of poke, just be aware of the high mana costs. There's an interesting build that actually maxes this ability first, and we'll go over that in builds. Finally, her ultimate, Bullet Time, channels waves of bullets in a cone in front of her for 3 seconds that does AoE physical damage. Each wave can critically strike, so buying crit is an option, and I'll show you some builds for that next. You cannot move during your ultimate, but you can cancel at any time by move clicking anywhere, using another ability, or an item active. Unless you actually want to cancel it, be careful not to click anything or press abilities once you have ulted. Usually you'll want to cancel it if the enemy has moved out of your ult area or there's a threat and you need to run. You can use summoners like heal, barrier, exhaust, cleanse and ignite, as well as wards without interrupting it. This ult can be used to wave clear in desperate situations to save towers or you urgently need to back. But I would still prioritize this ult for fights. It's an amazing zoning tool, forcing enemies to either back out or risk taking damage. It's great if the enemies are bunched up, so fights in the jungle, around towers, and especially around Baron and Dragon fights are in your favor. Wait for allies to use their AoE CC, then use this, or use your E right before to make it hard for enemies to escape. I'll explain more of this in combos. Wait for enemies to use any threatening CC before using this, or you risk having it cancelled. Although it's really effective to hit multiple targets, if you're ever in a 1v1 situation, don't hesitate using this in a fight. It's your longest ranged ability, so use it if you ever need to snipe an enemy further away. As for leveling abilities, the most common builds require Q max, W second and E last. However, since she's truly a unique champion when it comes to builds, watch the next section for different strategies. There's plenty of fun and viable builds, so check the description for timestamps or sit back and watch them all. This is where things start to get interesting for Misfortune. You can build almost any items you'd see on an ADC as long as you have the right runes and depending on your certain situation. I'm going to cover the most effective builds that you can pick and try in game right now. At the end of this section, I'll include some basics and tricks to using certain items and their special interactions with Misfortune if you need some extra info. They're not really in order of best to worst since they all have their pros and cons. The Press the Attack Blade of the Ruined King build. Let's start off with a highly effective build which includes Press the Attack as the major rune. Your first major buy is Blade of the Ruined King and then you want to build into full lethality. Full crit after your Bork is also an option. You'll do plenty of damage over time with this build, especially on a single target. Laning is safer because of the lifesteal you build early on. You can max Q if you want to poke down your enemies, however, since your Bork lacks AD compared to the other first buys that we'll mention, W max could be better for the attack speed steroid. You can always just get 2 to 3 points in Q, then max W if you want a bit of earlier lane pressure. Kiting is essential for this build to work efficiently, so pick this build when you have at least one champ to peel for you and the enemy team hasn't got 2 to 3 assassins. It has great synergy with your W attack speed and the lifesteal works great with Overheal, Bloodline and Absolute Focus keystones. Your Q counts as one Press the Attack stack. The Dark Harvest Burst build. The second build is the highly popular Dark Harvest rune. The strategy is to max Q, poke enemies to below HP in lane and aim to pick up Dark Harvest stacks. This build focuses on burst and you can even one-shot enemies in some cases. This is great against squishy enemies where you can reset this rune in fights and snowball your lead. You want to purchase all lethality items, but crit builds are also viable, especially if you're really ahead in lane. Use E's safe range to gain a stack on enemies below 50% HP. The Press the Attack or Conqueror with the standard AC build. So if you want to build like a standard ADC, then these two major runes are best. They take a little longer for a power spike compared to lethality builds. You'll also lose the utility from Youmuu's and Edge of Night, which can be crucial when you ult in teamfights. Press the Attack is better in most cases, yet if there are 2 or more tanks on the enemy side and you have decent peel on your team, then Conqueror will probably be best. You want to max W with this build as you'll heavily rely on attack speed for autos. You can still get 2 to 3 points in Q for laning phase. You can purchase Bloodthirster first for a safer laning phase. Bloodthirster will help you sustain in extended fights or if you're up against plenty of poke. The Arcane Comet poke build. This is another poke style build with Arcane Comet as the major rune. It's a little more consistent than Dark Harvest since you don't need the enemy to have below 50% HP to proc this. You should build full lethality and prioritize a black cleaver second or third if needed. Crit items are still viable with this rune. Your Q is great to reduce the cooldown of this rune while it's on cooldown since it's a single target spell with low cooldown already. You really want to have a team with nice CC or some peel as you'll depend on your ult damage over consistent damage from autos. It's possible to proc 2 comments later on as every single wave of bullet time reduces the cooldown of comment for every single enemy hit. The Conqueror Tank Shredder build. If the enemy team has 3 or more tanks, this might be the perfect build for your situation. Focused on pure tank shredding, you'll be maxing W to abuse your attack speed and get those 5 stacks of Conqueror ASAP. Blade of the Ruined King and Black Cleaver shred any tanks as long as you can kite, and a bit of peel will be necessary, then finish with crit items. Conqueror stacks can proc off your E and your R once, and your Q has potential to proc 2 stacks if it bounces to another enemy. The E Max build. This is another interesting build, maxing E to poke enemies from safe range. Corruption Potion will give you sustain to constantly poke, as well as the Biscuits. I wouldn't advise it against healing supports. This is best against immobile champs that will struggle to escape your E AoE slow. If you have poke support, the slow will make their abilities easy to land, so try to synergize with them when you can. This is another build where you want to build full lethality. The increased slow from E will make it even harder for them to escape when you use your ultimate. The full ultimate bot build. This one can work if you're behind or just want to become a legitimate ultimate bot. You will prioritize your ultimate to carry the game. As long as you have one or more AoE CC champs on your team, it's cost effective. Skip boots and prioritize getting lethality ASAP. You'll have to rely on W and Youmuus for any movement speed you require. Dark Harvest or Arcane Comet is fine. This was one of my main strategies to climb in Diamond 1, as even if I was behind in gold, sacrificing boots meant I still had just as much if not more AD than my laner. The Kleptomancy Misfortune build. I actually started testing this towards the end, and it's legitimately great on Misfortune, specifically because you can proc Klepto stacks safely with your Q. It provides an amazing laning phase for all the utility it provides from HP, mana, wards, and other random items. It's also really fun if you rarely play champs with Kleptomancy. The excitement of getting random items through Q poke keeps things interesting while still being very viable. You want to build full lethality, but crit items are just as viable. There is a small option of maxing E for this, as you'll gain mana pots and mana flow rings for sustain, so you won't rely on Q for damage in lane, as it will only be used to proc stacks. A popular second strategy that can be used as a second page is magical footwear and biscuit delivery. Misfortune can actually sacrifice early boots because of her W movement speed, so this is very cost effective. The biscuits will allow her to sustain in tougher poke lanes. This can be substituted in most second pages of the previously mentioned builds. Special item mentions. Let's quickly cover the most optimal times to use certain items, as well as special interactions with Misfortune. MF is quite immobile once she's taken damage, so use the movement speed active from Youmuu's for positioning in teamfights, escaping, and even chasing an enemy down. Edge of Night is best used right before your ult. Having this spell shield may stop certain CCs from interrupting your ultimate, and it could be crucial to winning a teamfight. Duskblade's passive can be procced from your Q bounce in lane. It's best first when you want to snowball, enemies are squishy, or you don't rely on the speed active from Youmuu's. Rapid Fire Cannon extends the range of your Q, so it's great for long range poke. It can also help you apply Duskblade's passive from far range. Black Cleaver is great for when you're up against 2 or more tanks, so purchase it after 2 lethality items or after your Bork. Of course, you can always build this earlier if you want. Each wave of your ult adds a Black Cleaver stack, so it can be best early in fights to help shred enemies' armor. Executioner's Calling passive is also applied by a single wave of your ult. You can potentially apply it to the entire enemy team to counter any healing comps for only 800 gold. Although Berserker Greaves is great on MF, she can sacrifice the attack speed from these and purchase defensive boots, Mercury Treads, Ninja Tabis, or Boots of Swiftness, since she'll still have plenty of attack speed from your W, and Bork if you've purchased that. Upgrading to Blue Trinket after level 9 is generally a good idea, especially to scout brushes. When to go crit over lethality. Lethality has a better early game power spike as you'll deal more damage with abilities, whereas crit takes 2 to 3 items to really get optimal damage, but it does guarantee a stronger late game and does more damage over time. Also, lethality items provide important actives as mentioned before, so if you don't have enough utility and peel from your team, it may be better over a crit build. You can even buy 1 to 3 lethality items early on, and then transition into crit items later on. Combos and important mechanics. Auto attack, then immediately Q. This is very simple but important for optimal damage in a short amount of time. Trade combo. Auto attack, Q, auto attack. This is great for a quick trade, and you can activate W after your second auto if you're going to follow up with more autos. Ideally, you want your Q to bounce onto another enemy or minion, so your second auto attack will proc love tap again. You can use E before or after a combo for either more damage or you want to catch up to an enemy. Flash auto Q. You want to flash then instantly auto and Q as mentioned before. This is great to snipe enemies that are low HP and you want to finish them off. If they're still in range, you should follow up with another auto after your Q. full optimal combo. Auto attack, Q, E, ultimate. If you've taken press the attack, the most optimal damage would be auto attack, Q, auto attack, E, ultimate. This guarantees extra damage from your ultimate when press the attack is fully stacked. Q ult. Q a low HP minion, then immediately ult. If you're extremely certain the enemy will take damage from your Q bounce, immediately follow up with an ult and they'll be bursted down. This is to surprise the enemy with insane amount of damage in a short amount of time. Edge of Night E, R. Since the Edge of the Night active needs to channel for 1 second, position yourself in that time, then immediately E and ult. This is best for teamfights, as even if the enemy tries to cancel you with a CC, you'll still be able to channel your ult. Careful if they have more than one CC ability, so it may be best to wait for those CCs to be used before using this combo. This will be one of your most common combos used in game from safe range. The RFC combo. While your RFC is fully stacked and you have its passive active, Q then auto. You'll get the extra range from rapid fire cannon, and as the Q is traveling, you will still have time to auto with the extended range. The normal combo of auto then Q doesn't work, as it will lose the range after your auto. Things to keep in mind when playing Misfortune. Your love tap damage is great if you can coordinate in fights to constantly change target for optimal damage. However, this is an optimal case, as being an immobile ADC, you'll most likely have to attack the closest target continuously. Your Q is great for fights early on, but late game, if you have plenty of attack speed, the animation from your Q will cause you to miss 1 to 3 autos, which means you will actually do less damage, especially if you're using a crit build. It can be best not to use it late game unless you're going for an RFC auto poke, a flash Q auto, or you want to hit an enemy with the Q bounce behind a target. If you've gone mostly lethality late game, then Q is good during a fight if your W strut is on cooldown. Your E should be used mostly for its utility, so use it to kite and keep enemies from reaching you rather than trying to just get some damage off. Even though these combos are very useful, it's your positioning, decision making, and the build you've chosen for your specific game that will determine how effective you are on Misfortune. Laning early game. Misfortune has a pretty strong laning phase. You can take Q or W at level 1. Q offers a chance to do more damage with a max damage bounce, as well as push the wave faster by hitting 2 minions with 1 Q, as you can proc love tap twice. Q costs slightly more than W, especially if you spam 2 to 3 before you hit level 2. W is still great to wave clear, and it also provides you with movement speed, perhaps if you want mobility to dodge certain skill shots. Pick whatever is best for your situation. Ideally, you want to push as fast as possible to reach level 2 before the enemy later. If you beat them to level 2, go aggressive and aim for a hard trade. You can even try to deny the enemy's XP by zoning them. If they beat you to level 2, simply back off and don't take any risks, but do your best to stay within minion XP range. The main focus after this is to land those Q bounces, specifically those max damage Qs. Pay attention to their movement, as you'll be able to land Qs easier if you predict where they'll move. You can try walking towards some enemies first, and if they back off, aim for a minion that is directly behind them. The only way they could avoid this is by walking forwards or sideways, but it could leave them in a vulnerable position depending on your support. By eventually poking them down, you can then force an all-in or pressure them to miss CS if they back off. Go for trades with combos previously mentioned. At level 6 you have potential to win 2v2 fights depending on your support, which I'll cover more in detail in the next section. Make sure your support hits some CC, the enemy has no flash or just recently used their dash or blink ability, and you have low risk of having your ultimate interrupted. As long as these conditions are met, you can safely ult with a high potential to kill an enemy, especially if you're able to hit 2 enemies inside your ult. If you plan on hard pushing the enemies into tower, make sure to hit the tower if it's safe by autoing a minion, then the tower for love taps extra damage. You should have vision control in river and around tri-brushes to avoid getting ganked. Against some enemy supports, this is very risky, so check out that next section if you want more details. After laning phase, your main priority is to group and stay around at least one teammate. You're extremely vulnerable even if you're fed. You want to push for objectives with your team. Your massive AoE ultimate is great for dives, fights around dragons and other epic monsters, and it can turn games around if enemies decide to dive your team under towers. You can even use it for wave clear to protect towers. Farming can be difficult since it's risky to move up in side lanes alone, so make sure you have a teammate around or you have plenty of vision. Sometimes freezing the wave next to your tower is the safest option. However, you risk your team losing fights around the map since they'll be outnumbered without you. If you trust your team to play safe, this is a great option. Just general ADC advice, but trying to stay alive at all costs should be one of your main priorities. Even if your team loses a fight, just staying alive and picking up CS will allow you to increase your damage output next fight with the extra AP and gold you pick up, as well as perhaps save some towers. It only takes one good ultimate to seriously turn a game around, so be patient when you have to when playing MF. And of course, if your team wins a fight, you can then push your advantage by taking towers using your important auto attacks for damage. Mid to late game and team fighting. Not much changes during mid to late in terms of gameplay. You should still stay grouped and constantly look for good opportunities to ult and deal as much damage while kiting. Teamfighting is your main strategy out of lane. No matter your build, you should still play most teamfights similarly. Look for chances to ult when enemies are grouped. Your team CC and enemy CCs are things to keep in mind. Sometimes you can even use your ult to zone enemies' entire areas. Sure, you may not hit every single enemy, but some squishies will be forced out of fights or they risk running into your ult AoE damage. Behind walls, entire areas of the jungle, while you're in a brush or dragon pit or baron pit are great areas to channel your ultimate. Use all the tips from abilities, builds and combos to get the most effective results. Some more general ADC advice, but when it comes to kiting and auto attacking, your best bet is to attack the closest target. If there are 2 or more close targets, remember to abuse your love tap by alternating auto attacks between different enemies. Not only do you deal optimal damage, it will reduce W's cooldown. There may be a chance to Q poke 2 enemies, so look for that, especially if you can Q bounce onto a squishy target. Your E should be rarely used for damage, but rather for the slow. Especially late game, the slow will allow you to kite, escape and catch enemies. Let's quickly cover ADC matchups. I'll list a few tips to help you win lane against them and what to watch out for. MF is generally a pretty strong laner. Most of our threat in bot lane will come from supports, so I'll cover that in enemy supports. I'm going to group ADC matchups into 3 groups: Immobile champs, champs with a dash or blink, and unique champs. Immobile champs will find it difficult to escape your ultimate, and they're generally low threat on their own, but they still have plenty of damage that should be respected. Gap closing champs have an easier time escaping your ult, so you either need to have your support land CC or wait until the gap closing ability is on cooldown. Unique champs vary between AP champs, Yasuo, and rarely seen champs. Just a quick note, this is mainly for players who aren't as familiar with every single champion's abilities. The few tips I've mentioned may help you understand the threats of the champion without having to play them yourself. I will commentate this part pretty quickly. Let's first cover tips on immobile champs. Ashe, her autos apply are slow so she can chase you down. She has strong trades when her Q is fully charged at 4 stacks. Stay behind minions to avoid her W damage and slow. At 6, keep your distance and constantly move in unpredictable directions to avoid her long range stun arrow, which can be followed up by a gank. Her ult can cancel yours. Draven, safe to trade if he ever drops his spinning axes, otherwise play safe. You can aim your Q bounce where he needs to catch his axe. His W speed up can close distance, so keep your distance. His E can cancel your ult. Don't stay low HP or he can ult you from long range. Even if you get hit by the first part of his ult, try to sidestep the return ult. Jhin, his 4th auto does extra damage displayed under his HP bar and his spinning gun animation. His Q bounces 4 times, so avoid standing close to low HP minions. He can root you with his long range W if you have been marked. Watch out for his E traps, try to activate it when it's safe. Your W movement will make it easier to dodge his ult snipes. His 4th ult shot does more damage. Sivir, her passive speeds her up when she hits an ability or an auto. Sidestep her Q when possible to at least avoid the return Q. Her W ricochet adds up damage over time, so avoid it by standing away from minions when you can. She can spell shield your Q with E. She gains movement speed for herself and allies with her ult, so keep your distance if you ever predict she may go aggressive. Twitch, his autos add poison stacks. His Q invis must be respected whenever he's missing and you see his support is suddenly aggressive. He gets attack speed once he appears. His W is a slow poison field, so avoid standing in it. His E procs more damage from poison stacks. At 6 stacks he does max damage, so avoid extended trades. His ult gains massive attack range, so either be ready to all in him or back off and respect him. Varus, dodge his Q using your movement speed passive when you see him charge it up. His W adds stacks which proc damage if he hits abilities. His E is an AoE skill shot that applies grievous wounds, damages and slows, so don't fight on top of it. His ult will root you, but it won't cancel your ult. Xayah, after using her abilities, her next 3 autos drop feathers. Her Q throws 2 feathers for poke. They move through minions but you take less damage. Her W increases her attack speed and her autos will deal extra damage and speed her up, so avoid trading while it's down. Her E will return all feathers, damaging everything on the way, so don't stand directly in line with her and her feathers. If you're hit by 3 or more, you will be rooted. Her ult throws 5 feathers in front of her, makes her untargetable and allows her to move, so she can use it to avoid most of your ult. Now let's cover ADCs with at least one gap closer. Caitlyn, back off when she has a crit passive auto. Try to dodge her Q poke. It does less damage when it passes through a target, but increases in width. Avoid her traps at all costs, and be careful about traps in brushes. Don't walk directly in front of her or she can get an easy E-net and crit auto. Don't be below 20% HP or she can ult you from long range. Be ready to stand behind your support so they can tank damage, or tank damage for them if you can. Ezreal, stand behind minions to avoid his Q damage. His W can travel through minions. Back off if he lands it, as he will proc extra damage with a Q auto. Don't ult while he still has E or he can blink out. His ult does a lot of damage, so move randomly to dodge it. Kai'Sa, you win small trades. Don't let her proc 5 stacks on her passive. She needs to be close to use her Q. Stay close to your minions to negate some of her Q damage. Stand behind minions to avoid her W poke. She gains attack speed after E. If you are marked with plasma, she can blink to your location. Her autos, W, and enemy CC will proc plasma stacks. Kalista, her Q poke can be avoided standing behind minions, unless she executes it, which will pass on the stacks to you. She wins extended trades with her stacked E damage. At level 6 you need to respect her, especially if she has a tanky support, as she can throw them onto you for massive damage and CC. Lucian, his double auto passive after abilities makes it hard to win trades. Don't stand directly behind minions to avoid his Q poke. If he hits W, he will gain movement speed when he or an enemy attacks you. Respect him as he can always dash in and go aggressive. When he ults, stand behind minions or a tanky support, or use your E to slow him and try to get out of the range ASAP. Tristana, her Q increases attack speed and will help her E-bomb stack damage from autos, so avoid trading while it's up. She can W jump and all in you, so stay healthy or back off. Her ult damages and pushes you back, which can cancel your ult. Vayne, her Q can dash out of your ult and applies extra damage on her next auto. Her W procs true damage at 3 stacks, so keep trades short or simply poke her down. Her E can stun you if you're close to a wall, and it can cancel your ult. Her ult will make her invis and increase her AD. Your ult covers a huge area, so you still have a good chance of damage her in her invis. Finally, let's cover unique champs who aren't really ADCs or are rarely seen bot lane like Quinn. Cass, her small AoE Q poisons you and speeds her up. Her W field slows and poisons you while you're on it. If you're poisoned, she will follow up with E spam to chunk you and even try to ult in you, so back off if you get hit by Q. Her ult can stun and cancel your ult if you're facing her. Heimer, his turrets push fast and automatically attack targets he autos, so try to kill them before you trade with him. His W poke can be avoided standing behind minions. Do everything you can to dodge his E stun, or he will follow up with W and more damage. Your movement speed will make it easy to dodge this. He can cancel your ult with his E stun. His R empowers each ability. His Q and W basically do more damage, so they have high potential to one-shot you, and his E increases in width and bounces 3 times, making it very easy to stun and cancel your ult. Nico, her passive allows her to transform into one of her teammates, so keep that in mind throughout laning. Her Q won't be leveled if she builds AD, otherwise it's her main poking ability. Her W creates a clone and she becomes invis. Her W passive adds extra damage on her third auto, which will be displayed on a small animation on her character. Her E travels faster through minions and increases the route duration, so either stay further back or to the side. Her ult is a massive AoE around her which shields herself and stuns enemies within the radius. Quinn, her passive will mark you when she uses abilities or at random, so avoid trades while you're marked. Her Q has decent range and will apply near sight, which basically means you need to be very close to see her. Her E-Volt knocks you back a little, which can cancel your ult, and slows you. She needs to channel her ult for 2 seconds. Once Vela picks her up, she gains massive movement speed. This becomes a problem more out of lane, as she can assassinate you 1v1. Yasuo, try to proc his shield before Q trades. His Q has low range, but at 2 stacks he can throw a long range tornado that damages and knocks you up. His W wind wall will negate your ult damage, so only use it while his wind wall is down. His E makes him extremely threatening and mobile through minions. His R is a huge threat, especially if his support has a displacement CC. Synergies. Since there are so many supports to cover, we can simply categorize most of them and give you some tips in order to synergize with them. Tanks CC. These tanky champs absorb plenty of damage, provide excellent peel, and generally plenty of CC. They are great peel for misfortune, especially out of lane in teamfights, and allow you to channel your ultimate safely once they land their CC. You just need to be wary that even if your support engages in lane, the enemy support or ADC could easily just turn and focus you, leaving you in a vulnerable state. These champs generally favor hard engages, so do your best to ping or communicate with your support when you feel confident going for an all-in, or whether you want to play safe and farm until a good opportunity comes. For example, you poke them down, your jungler is ganking, or the enemy misses important abilities. Poke CC. These champs provide predominantly poke, but also some nice CC. They don't provide anything directly to Misfortune, but the pressure from their poke means you aren't focused as much. Play this lane cautiously, as any time your squishy support gets caught out, you need to back off and let them die since they lack escapes, but you can always try to use E to save them. However, if they're able to land plenty of poke, you can easily dominate this lane, so play aggressively. You want to be ready to use your ult whenever they land their CC. Heals, Shields, CC. These supports amplify Misfortune's strengths and allow you to get away with more poke than usual. You'll be the main damage dealer in this lane, so don't be afraid to go for hard trades even if you get focused for a bit, as you'll eventually gain HP back with your support's abilities. Be ready to dish out poke to enemies whenever these supports apply their shields or buffs on you. Again, anytime they land CC, be ready for your ultimate. Mixed champs that vary with poke, CC, and shields. These champs have a few characteristics of the previously mentioned champs, so play accordingly. If they land CC, follow up with your ult as usual. Fiddle offers nice CC and poke, but his E will inevitably push the lane, so warding is essential as you're both immobile and squishy. Comet offers great poke and shield, applying a speed up, increasing Misfortune's mobility even more with your W. Look for her potential snare tether and follow up with a trade or an ultimate. Lulu offers great poke, shield, speed up, and extra HP when she ults you, as well as a unique Pixie CC, immobilizing a champ from dealing damage. Morgana's main ability is her Q, so be ready whenever she hits it to go for a hard trade or use your ultimate. It can also make it easier to land your Q bounce if there's a minion to bounce it from. Be ready to all in if she ever walks in and uses her ult. CC and Utility. These supports are unique as they have a few of the categories mentioned with their own playstyle. Rakan offers a heal if he lands Q. Try to offer him a dash if you ever see him running. When he tries to knock up an enemy, that's the best time to go for a combo. When he goes all in with his knock up and ult charm, that's the best time for you to ult. You have high potential to turn games later on. Zillion's main threat is his double Q bomb, so be ready to ult when he lands this. He can also slow an enemy with E, making it easier to land this combo, so be ready. He can also speed you up, so be ready to continue chasing for a kill or play slightly aggressive if you trust he will speed you up to get away. At 6, he can offer you a GA. Just make sure it's a close fight, as even if you revive, the enemy team can set up their damage and CC when you're alive. Unique support, Pyke. Not only is he unique since he builds like a melee AD assassin, his potential Q hook means he can CC and catch enemies from safe range. Be ready to ult after he follows up with his E dash stun. If you're ever low in a fight, don't be afraid to back off, as Pyke can usually finish enemies off and still give you the kill gold from his ult. If he's a good Pyke, he'll apply so much pressure, the enemy laners will play passive, allowing you to farm, otherwise play cautious as it may be an auto-fill Pyke. Also, there's a high tendency of Pykes to roam, so be careful and back off when he does. Support threats. Since we've covered a lot of supports in Synergy, you can use most of the tips I've already mentioned to play against them. Here's a quick summary. Against poke supports, you should look to poke them with Q since they're squishy, but respect them when their abilities are up. Your movement speed from W will help with dodging. Early boots may help too. Against tanks, respect their form of CC, but aim to poke them when you can since you have the range advantage. Be careful of the enemy jungler, as they will follow up anytime the enemy supports aims to CC you. There's a high chance these champs will look to cancel your ult, so keep this in mind. Against heal or shielding supports, your Q will generally be healed up, so unless you can hit multiple Qs in a row, poke will have little effect. Unless you have a support that can all in, this may turn into a farm lane. Let's go over strengths and weaknesses to keep in mind when you pick Misfortune in your next game. I'll also mention some options to combat her weaknesses. Strengths. Build diversity. No matter what situation you're in, there's a build that's effective. The build section has almost everything covered. AoE plus single target damage. Your ult can delete enemies if channeled for full length, and depending on your build, you have plenty of single target DPS, as well as a lot of Q poke in lane. High movement speed. As long as she's not taking damage, her W movement speed allows her to get to lane faster, quickly move around the map, and catch fleeing enemies. Solid laning phase. Strong trading, good poke, zoning E, and utility from W allows her to have a strong laning phase, which you can easily dominate if you hit those max damage Q bounces. Effective even when behind. I mentioned a certain strategy in builds that allows you to skip boots, allowing you to prioritize damage and focus on getting an optimal ult. Even if you're behind, one good ult and you can turn an entire game around. Purchase a back cleaver second and Executioner's Calling, shredding the enemy team and applying Greaves runes for your team to clean up fights. Weaknesses. Immobile. As long as you're taking damage, your W's movement speed will be cancelled, making you a sitting duck. Use your E when you can to slow enemies to avoid them getting in range. Sometimes, if you know there's no escaping, it's best to just fight to the death. This way you have a chance to pick up a kill and chunk enemies enough for either your team to finish them off or force them to back with low HP. Vulnerable while ulting. While channeling your ultimate, you can't move for 3 seconds unless you cancel it. The Edge of Night active, waiting for your team CC and enemy CC are things you should keep in mind before you ult. Peel reliant. You rely on Peel to dish out damage. After laning phase, make sure you have your support or other teammates around, as you're extremely vulnerable. This also means if you want to pick up farm from side lanes, you'll need plenty of vision or have one of your teammates close by. Weak 1v1. You can still 1v1 some immobile champs, since it will be harder for them to walk out of your ult, but you generally lose most 1v1s unless you're extremely ahead. Make sure you stay around teammates and never get too cocky by trying to 1v1 champs like Vayne or Draven, unless again you're extremely fed.
Don't get cocky.
Miss Fortune will always be a great option for me when I play ADC. Her dynamic runes and item selection makes her fun to play and viable for certain situations. Whether you want to poke and chunk enemies, shred them with autos, one-shot squishies with a big Q bounce, or decimate entire enemy teams with a well-timed ultimate, it's all possible on Miss Fortune. So that's pretty much it for this guide. I've changed up a few things. I added runes and items into the same section without going into detail about every item like in previous guides. Let me know if you like these changes or perhaps what you'd like to see improved. Remember to subscribe and click the notification bell, as there'll be plenty of ultimate guides coming and new exciting content. I'm Zoose, and I'll see you guys in the next video.